Let's have our fireside chat, overcoming headwinds and seizing opportunities. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Sneh Vaswani, the co-founder and CEO of Miko, who has proven that robots can be as cute as they are smart.
So when it comes to navigating the world of tech, Sneh is the guy you want in the driver's seat. Just don't be surprised if his co-pilot is a robot. A big round of applause, guys.
Also, please welcome Mr. Neelkanth Mishra, Chief Economist, Axis Bank, and Head of Global Research and a whole-time Director of Axis Capital. He is so well-versed in navigating economic turbulence that he can turn dry economic data into actionable insights.
He is also a gold medalist and was ranked 4th in the entrance exam to the IITs. So he's the guy we tried to sit next to during exams.
I can see Sneh looking at him. I should have seen sit beside you. Mr. Ashish Wadhwani, Managing Partner of IvyCap Ventures, would be moderating this chat for us as he has the knack of pulling out the best of stories. Ashish, over to you.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming to IvyCap Day. Good morning, Neelkanth. Good morning, Sneh. Neelkanth, let me start with you. Uh, 60% of India wasn't born and has not seen the Cold War. And here we are talking of a Cold War, again. We are talking of the N word being used in multiple conflicts, again and again. The dollar's demise is being talked about. And yet there are 1,500 people registered on a Saturday morning for IvyCap Day. What's going on? Can you paint a picture of what the world looks like? And are people seeing completely different things?
That's a great question to start. Thank you for inviting me here, and it's a privilege to be talking to you. The one thing to remember about things like Cold Wars is that in hindsight, in history, they appear to be very meaningful and important, but while they are happening, the world goes on. You'll be surprised that till 1942, there were several critical materials that the British companies were actually shipping to Germany. So the world goes on. The Chinese and the Japanese can keep fighting each other, but between 1970 and 2020, the trade between China and Japan went from $1 billion to $400 billion. There are 20,000 people today who travel daily between China and Japan. So world goes on, business goes on, and which is why I think most of us are here. When you think about the world over the next decade, though, I think there are 3 important changes that we need to keep in mind. There are several, but I'll just summarize it. It's a short session. The first is it's a slower growth world. So we are used to the world growing much faster. And so as you think about India, one of the biggest headwinds for us is that the world was growing at 4.5–5% in 2005, 6, 7. Today it's growing at 3–3.5%, and I think slowing. So it's going to be a slower growth world. The second, the cost of capital is going to be much higher. The US, which determines the cost of capital for most of the world, is actually has shifted from a tight fiscal loose monetary approach, which meant 0% cost of capital for large sums, large durations, to a loose fiscal tight monetary approach, and therefore unless it goes into recession, cost of capital will remain high. The third big change is that the era of free markets, open borders is now slowly coming to an end. The demise started about 2015-16. We are now going to see a much more fragmented world. So as we think about how we shape our economy, the importance of industrial policy, intervention of governments, it's going to be a very different world than what we've been used to in the last 35–40 years.
So is it rain and thunderstorm that we are seeing, or is it sunshine? When you look at where your, sort of crystal ball or look through your sort of
really.
binoculars.
So I think, the problem with headlines, my 12-year-old son has started to read newspapers now, and he came out and read the newspapers and said, you know what, Baba, this world looks like a nasty place, only negative headlines. And I told him that, look, negative headlines sell. we are here because our ancestors, we have inherited the genes of ancestors who were paranoid. Only they survived, which is why we are here. So we look out for negative news. 15 positive things will happen in your day. One negative thing, you'll go to bed thinking about that negative thing, right? So these things happen. World goes on, life goes on. Even during the Cold War, the world made gigantic strides in technology, in innovation. Lots of money was made. So I think we should not get obsessed by that, but at least try to weave it into our strategies. Even if there was a hot war, forget about a cold war, I don't think it really affects 99% of the world.
It's good to see an economist more positive than negative. It makes everyone smile. Sneh, you're probably one of the 60% who has not seen the Cold War or not seen any war, has not seen a downturn, right? What makes you so positive about the world, in the next 10 years?
So broadly, I think while the macros and the Cold War and these discussions are going, I think the society overall and the needs of the society are continuously evolving, because of the rapid evolution of the needs, there are significant opportunities for founders to capitalize on those needs and build long-standing companies. And what consumer was used to a certain trend for 5 years, now consumer trends are changing literally every year or two from now. So a company of today is very different from a company of a decade or two prior. They need to constantly keep evolving to the consumer needs, and that opens a very big opportunity to build upon sustainable long-term businesses, which no one does.
What about technology tailwinds? I mean, we've never had such a synchronized technology, on multiple, whether you call it AI or biotech or any of these things, such a synchronized, wave of technology tailwinds. Does that offer any hope for the world?
I think we've just seen the tip of the iceberg, whatever is happening in the space of AI or in robotics. Literally in 3 to 4 years or 5 years from now, the world will be very different from what we are seeing today. There will be rapid automation. There will be AI in every aspect of a consumer as well as an enterprise life. And the way we do business, the way we conduct ourselves will be very different. So this just opens a significant opportunity for the technology tailwinds to further grow from here. And we do not see this slow down in terms of disruption anytime soon.
So the world doesn't stop, societal needs evolve, and technology tailwinds are here like never before. Let's zoom in on India now and look at a 10-year horizon. Can you paint a picture? I mean, like you said, every day there are lots of negative news. But can you help this audience, which is always sort of venture capital audience, founders looking long term, what does India look like in 10 years' time?
I think it looks like a very exciting opportunity to me. There are, as a policymaker or as for policymakers, I think there are many challenges. I think it is presumptuous for us to think that growth is given. As we look at China and how it has evolved over the last half a century, they have every 4 or 5 years they've done gut-wrenching reforms. So there is a lot of change that we need to bring about. But as we think about growth over the next 5, 7 years, 10 is perhaps a bit too long, I see that there will be more workers, as simple as that. There will be better productivity. Total factor productivity will keep improving. We are importing best practices from the world. It's a much more open world. We are so far away from the technology frontier that it's easier to sort of catch up. The example I give is when the US, rural US went from landlines to 4G over 100 years. Rural India went from no phones to 4G, cheapest data in the world in 10 years. So those kind of things are still likely and happening. There's a lot of stuff we are doing with the digital public infrastructure. In fact, AI will solve many of the problems of education, healthcare that we have been struggling with. But the capital formation, which is a large part of that is real estate, has I think started to turn. And so I think maintaining a 6.5%, 7%, maybe a 7.5% growth over the next 5 years is very doable. What we do need to be aware of and prepare for and maybe act on is that we are going through or we are trying to achieve what no one else has achieved ever in history, no other country has achieved, which is go through this phase of growth which naturally increases inequality while being a fully functional democracy with universal suffrage. No other country has done it. So when Japan did it, it did not have universal suffrage. It got it in 1924. The Brits got it in the First World War. China, of course, doesn't have it. China, Korea, Taiwan, Spain, they were all dictatorships when this was happening. So I think there will be new pressures and challenges, but as policymakers, we need to resolve them. But I think the next 5 years of growth looks pretty much done for me.
And any sectors you want to sort of call out?
I think the energy
Very broad sectors.
Yeah, so energy ecosystem for sure. GDP growth and energy are very deeply interlinked. So as India grows, it will consume a lot more energy. One second part of this growth that we are likely to see now is, or at least the nature of growth and how it's different, is that it's mostly driven by per capita. See, in the 1980s, we also grew at 5.5. In the 1990s, we grew at 6.5. But a large part of that was labor input. 3% of the 5.5 that we did in 1980s was just labor input. So per capita wasn't changing that much. Today, labor input is just 0.7, 0.8%. So a large part of it is per capita, and that changes everything. That changes how people consume. So when you look at car demand, as you go from $2,500, $3,000 per capita to $8,000 per capita, car ownership doesn't go linearly. It goes from 8% to 80%. If you think about financial savings, the sophistication of financial savings, if you think about the ability to invest in healthcare, the ability to invest in leisure, the ability to invest in education, everything changes quite dramatically. So I think, but I would say in big picture terms, I think construction, machinery, energy would be, if I'm betting over the next 3 years, while I think people like you bet for longer durations, those would be, I'm more a public markets person.
Consumer, of course, right? Yeah. Entire consumer spend,
correct,
right?
Correct.
And sometimes, you got to make these numbers come alive. What happens to the journey of a consuming class in a country when it goes from, let's say, $3,000 per capita to say $10,000, even in the next 10 years, right? Cars, as you said, non-linear, luxury, non-linear, premium, non-linear, all 10x, right? I mean, we're looking at a 10x jump in almost everything.
That would be, yeah. I think it's reasonable to think that people will consume less calories, not more. So 50% of our food consumption, or 50% or 45% of our consumption basket, 5, 6 years back was food. As people grow richer, they consume less food because they're driving around more. So the spend on food may not fall as sharply because they consume higher quality, that I would call luxury. So the rest has to grow faster. And again, apparel, how many more clothes are you going to wear? So everything, that operating leverage kind of theory applies, and most of these segments then see extraordinarily rapid growth. And as you are going through them, you will see commentary that, unequal growth, K-shaped recovery, this, that. I think that's fact. At this stage of economic development, I think that is natural. And remember that even in 2012, the top 10% of Indian households consumed as much as the bottom 50%. And I think the growth, so as that 10% becomes 15%, 20% in terms of affordability of various goods and services, I think the sector expansion can be quite significant.
Sneh, I think the other dimension here, and we spoke a lot about per capita, is make in India and make for the world. Even, and we all remember it, right? I mean, I think even 20 years ago, we were told that Indians can't do software products. Then we were told Indians can't do manufacturing, right? Even though we had a fairly good manufacturing base in Asia when we got independent, right? Like better than a lot of countries in Asia, right? And here you are, and maybe it's good that you're not seeing that part of the world or that era of the world. But here you are trying to build a company for the world, and you know you're the premier or probably the best kids robot company in the world today. Is that
That's
fair
correct.
to say?
That's correct.
Can you throw some light on it?
Sure. So, just to give a very short 30-second background on this, we've built this wellness platform for kids centered around a consumer robot that engages, educates, and entertains kids, reports the developmental metrics back to parents. Now, in the past 2 years, we've sold more than 500,000 robots globally. We're the fastest growing company in this category in the US. And the aspiration is over the next decade to impact 100 million kids, build $1 billion revenue generating, profitable, deep tech company from India. So that's the roadmap from here. I think to the point that you raised, there's a big difference from what it was before to now. One, if you look at any Bay Area company doing deep tech, you will always find either one founder is an Indian, it's either the CTO, or the early employees are Indians. So the question arises, why can't we build it from here? And you get a significant cost arbitrage, which we all know, when you start building it from here. But when we started, we realized that when you're building a consumer company, you need to align with the culture of the market in which you're selling into. Your product needs to align for that market. If you're selling in the US, the people should feel this is an American product. And when we started selling, so India, at that point, the Indian consumer was very different from an American consumer. Back then in 2017, when we started selling Mikos, 98% buyers were fathers, 2% were mothers. A 20,000 rupee robot, mother would never take the decision and home to buy it. Father used to take a call, it's a gadget for my child, I am taking the shots, I'll buy it. In the US, it was quite the opposite. The mother in the US is also working, taking decisions for the child, 60-65% mothers. In 2019, 60-65% buyers were mothers and 30-35 were fathers. Come today in 2024, the tier 1 cities in India, the metrics have pretty much been like the US, where the mothers are taking the front seat of deciding when they want to buy a Miko for their kid. And the trends are very much matching the American audience. For tier 1, there's a growing audience who's matching the global trend. So for an Indian founder, when you're building over here, you are no longer lost in trying to understand the global consumer, because you have a test bench in India where you can build products for the globe very quickly, iterate at a low cost, and then start selling it to different parts of the world. And so India becomes the perfect place for you to get your product right and then scale it up globally. This was not the advantage which we had a decade ago. This is the change of the society, the change of the consumer, which I was referring to, which is what we witnessed. Second most important aspect is the Indian founder is extremely frugal in their mindset, which most Western founders are not. The government ecosystem has evolved very well. The policies are in our favor, and the venture ecosystem has also evolved significantly. So the question arises, why not? I mean, it absolutely is possible to build a global company from India and scale it across different markets. So it's just the beginning.
So is Sneh an exception, or is he going to be the rule as far as making products in India and going global?
No, I think Sneh is definitely the pioneer. I mean, just showing that it can be done is, I think, very important. A lot of what we learn, as humans, we are natural apers, or rather, imitators. That's how our human behavior is very complex, so we copy from others. And so having a proven, and the insights that he gave, I think are going to inspire a lot more change to happen.
But can this thought process be scaled up to make India a product nation?
It is already starting in that direction. So just in the last, so as you know, I'm deeply involved with the India Semiconductor Mission. So while we are encouraging and we have seen some phenomenal progress, we had a great global semiconductor executive summit. 100 CXOs from all over the world came in the semiconductor ecosystem. But what fascinates me even more is the fact that the fabless ecosystem, chip design, so India has 1/5 of the world's chip design engineers, but very, very few Indian fabless companies. So what you see is that 20 of the top 50 maybe in NVIDIA are Indians, but there's no Indian who's taken that leap. A lot of changes are happening. So I have seen...
and what's causing that change also? Can you also throw light?
Yeah, so several things. The first is examples of what Sneh has done, that it can be done. Second, I think there are a lot of people who went, say of our vintage, my vintage, who are mid-40s, late 40s, who made their money, and they are now, parents are getting old, they want to do something out of India. They are also realizing that, and they have a lot of the expertise. They're working in Qualcomm, they're working in NVIDIA, they've seen the best of class things. What is also changing is that India now has a downstream ecosystem for hardware electronics. See, how do you decide? See, if you want to design a chip today, you need to know what's happening to, say, the next iPhone model 3 years, 5 years out, right? Because that's when you design the chip. And if you don't know, you have no visibility, what do you design for? So I think what we are starting to see is one, a lot of Indian origin expertise which has the capability to come back. Second, the ecosystem development in India is giving comfort to people. And third, see what happens even in software. We started with Y2K. Remember that it was grunt work. But over a period of time, if you have smart people, they figure out. And so you start with IT services, and then SaaS comes up, and suddenly, I mean, as Sneh was saying, it's very hard to differentiate between a US SaaS company and an Indian SaaS company, because the marketing all happens in the US, all the development happens in India. It's just that headquarters are, fungible. And so even in product development, I think we are starting to get there. There's a long, long way to go. It's very different business from the low quality services that we've been providing. It requires risk capital, people like you. It requires gutsy entrepreneurs. I mean, we have Mr. Chaudhary here, he tried to do it in the 70s. So it has been proven. So I think the chips are falling in line. I think things are coming together.
Look, I think part of what Sneh is saying and you're saying is it's driven by entrepreneurs, smart, trained technologists, etc., driven by technology tailwind, opportunity in the market. But I want to also ask you about something structural, right? Since 91, I think the definition of liberalization was we keep reducing our tariff rate and we'll become competitive. And that certainly played out, right? But can you, I'm going to make it sort of comparative. In the mid-2000s, we were comparing cost structures of making in India versus China. And Indians at that time believed that, China has low-cost labor. That cost advantage had gone on a dollar per hour basis by then. It was a productivity issue. But bigger advantage was from capital cost, logistics, other raw material, other factors of production.
Absolutely.
So unless you structurally change, can you really,
good points.
Have become a product nation, or do we have to rely on?
I hear you. So that's a fascinating input. I should have covered that. So let's look at cost of capital. What you're seeing is a government under political pressure trying to bring down its fiscal deficit, despite the political pressure. The 10-year bond yield on a sustainable basis is already at 6.8. I think if the government sticks to its 26 target, I think it will be below 6.5. And as the rate cuts start, maybe at 6%. So the long-term capital available at 6% is still higher than China at 2%, but it is remarkable. We've never achieved that. So that's one. So that is changing. Second, I think the state of infrastructure, the number of airports. I mean, now there are airports coming up in cities I've never heard of. You see the national highways, the rail freight capabilities, logistics cost as a percentage of GDP, which used to be 13, 14%, China at 7, 8%, or maybe 8, 9%. We are already at 10, 11%. So we have successfully brought it down. What we are also seeing, and if you see the government now actively talking about product nation, and what it is made available is a 1 lakh crore, 1 trillion rupee fund for pre-commercial R&D. They're also promoting, so the act of patenting is getting simplified. See, we have a 20, 25-year journey of hard work, consistently improving things. But when I think about the last 10 years and the distance we've covered in terms of improving infrastructure, bringing down cost of capital, relaxing, I mean, just enabling through digital public infrastructure a lot of innovation that can happen, simplification of tax payments. So a lot of other things that used to be bottlenecks are starting to ease, and so that I think is also an important change.
So it's also structural, not just pure brute force of smart people like Sneh.
Yes, I think that is there. But remember that brute force of smart people as Sneh is also very important, because that belief, and that is why, I mean, as you started off, I think it was a wonderful observation. Not having seen all the pain also changes you. Like people like me will always be risk averse. But when I see the people who graduated 15, 20 years back, 15 years back, their risk appetite is out of the world, and which is very important.
Very important, that's true. Sneh, again, I think Neelkanth spoke about cost advantage, SaaS. And I know that, and again, I want to look at the cost advantage, right? And I think everyone knows it's cheaper to build in India, right? But is it also much cheaper to market from India?
No.
Go ahead.
So first and foremost, I think when you are playing in an international market, you have to play by the rules of that market and address to the way that market evolves. Now, the way to keep your costs low is a very non-linear frugal approach to the way you market as well. So just to give you an example, the conventional way of most consumer companies is invest a lot into performance marketing and go down that route, and as you scale, the CAC keeps getting higher and higher. So we started investing into AI R&D for marketing also. So we built our own proprietary marketing tools to be able to keep the costs low, and we were able to reduce our CAC on Amazon by 80% in 1 year. And as a consequence of that, now that tool has become so famous that a lot of peer VC firms bring their consumer companies to us to help them on pro bono basis to reduce their CAC. I think the non-linear mindset of building something and getting to your set point is extremely important. Whether it is your product, whether it is your tech, whether it is your go-to-market and marketing, your marketing costs are not going to come down. And the way macros are today, I mean, if you look at, so we are heading into a world where you're entering cookie-less marketing, Chrome is deprecating cookies, and you would enter a point where there won't be any performance marketing. ROAS levels are going to come down and CAC levels are going to shoot up over the next 2-3 years for any consumer brand. So you need to be prepared, just like when global government policies change and you need to be prepared for those policies. You need to be looking at 3 years down the line on how marketing will be, how sales will be, how retail will be, and start building the processes for that. Being in India is not going to help you on that front. You will have to invest in building your brand, whether it is the US, whether it is the UK, or you're building a brand in Japan. You will have to invest into building it that way. But build it in a non-linear manner, in a frugal manner, and get to your set point.
Great. On that note, I think thank you, Neelkanth. Thank you, Sneh.
Thank you, Ashish.
Thank you, Ashish.
We have basically a very good summary of there's a thunderstorm, but there's also sunlight. There is opportunity. There are risks. And given where India is, it looks like a very positive outlook. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.